Well, hello everyone. Thanks for joining this live broadcast. I haven't figured out what to name these, but during the coronavirus pandemic era, especially while we're shut in, every weekday I'm going to take a little time and talk about homeschooling, especially. All schooling is homeschooling because if the home doesn't support and encourage and I guess hold the child accountable a little bit, schooling doesn't work well. So here we are, homeschooling. And I want to talk about reading and I want to talk about math today because there's an article that just came out that is underscoring the debacle of Common Core. I'm not mad about Common Core, but since its implementation over the past decade, the scores in reading and math have gone down. And so as a result, I think we need to talk about reading and math. What's going on there? Because if your kids learn reading and math, they're going to be very employable and excellent contributors to the future, and they're not going to have much competition, sadly. Now, the years leading up to that, we were actually seeing progress in math and in reading. So what I want to do is share a little bit, one quote from that article, and I want to talk to you about really what reading, how reading works and why it's important, how math works, why it's important, and what you can do, what you need to be doing. So if you have questions, I'd love to hear them and see if I can give a shot at answering them. And otherwise, we'll see if this is helpful. I bet it will be. I want to start with, I want to talk about swimming, not swimming in particular, but life-saving. Just this is an illustration of a principle. So if you'd bear with me, growing up in Alabama, one of the things we all did was we swam a lot. Not necessarily in pools, but lakes and creeks and all kinds of stuff. There's 3,000 miles of rivers in Alabama. So part of staying alive was learning how to swim. Well, I went on the process, not only learned how to swim, but I taught swimming lessons for some time, and I got certified in life-saving with what's called a Scout Lifeguard. I was Eagle Scout, and there was a special thing called the Scout Lifeguard, and another piece was WSI, Water Safety Instructor certification, that kind of stuff. Well, as they trained us, what we learned, there are a couple of principles in particular I remember, besides being a good swimmer. And the first was it'd give us tests. And so the test, you'd be hidden in a room, you'd come out, whether it's a pool or at a lake, and you're getting this training. And it's a scenario. And the scenario is all about how to save people. And so they'd probably put a couple of people, let's say in the pool, I remember the one I did, and somebody was far away, like in the deep end, screaming and splashing, drowning. And someone else was pretty close and was kind of underwater, barely flapping his hands. Well, what do? The screaming calls to you, but the principle is save who you can first. And so the answer is to get a towel or something and hand it to that person and pull them to the edge and make sure they're secure before you go get the other one. Both of them, reason I say a towel is because both of them understand something. Anybody that's swimming, that's drowning, that person is actually a threat to you if you're going to try to save them, because they're in a panic and their goal is to grab onto you. So you don't hop in the pool necessarily and help them out. That'll waste time. But a towel allows you, in that close scenario or pole or something, they can hold on to and you bring them to shore. Safety for you in case they panic. Going out and swimming, the first thing they taught us is when you swim to someone, if they're still staying above water, you kind of get close enough to start talking to them and see if you can get them to just chase you back to shore or to the edge of the pool. Because that is the least invasive, and if they can somewhat swim or just panic, you can get them there. If they're not, sometimes you wait for them to exhaust. There are a lot of things you can do, techniques. Sometimes another piece is to carry a float with a rope or a board or something with you to get them to latch onto, and you can pull them in with it. So I say that story because how you think about saving lives will affect what you do. And I'm going to tell you in math and reading, how you think about reading, what it's about, what we're trying to do, how kids learn it, will affect that game dramatically. So I'm going to give you some practical tips, but I want to begin by reading in this article. It had something called the Nation's Report Card. This is Dr. Peggy Carr, an associate commissioner at NCES. That's the National Center on Education and Statistics. So in this National Center on Education and Statistics, Dr. Carr said, over the past decade, there has been no progress in either mathematics or reading performance. The lowest performing students, those readers who struggle the most, have made no progress in reading from the first NAEP administration almost 30 years ago. So the kids that are struggling the most, especially doing poorly, some of them have done okay or stayed even. Mostly they're measuring fourth grade and eighth grade. And in thinking about that, I want you to appreciate something really important. And I'm going to argue this for both math and reading. And that is early, this is kind of counterintuitive, early success or early effectiveness at reading or math, early, doesn't necessarily correlate to later. I'll give you an example. You can look at the studies in mathematics around the world. America is actually up in the top group. I forget, last time I looked, top 4 or 5 or so, for certainly top 10 in mathematics worldwide. But by the time high school ends, we're way down the list, 30th or worse, okay? So if there's a correlation, we would expect to find good at math early, good at math later. It's going to be similar with reading, because you can actually take up reading or math later. In fact, there's something called readiness, reading readiness, math readiness. And if you take it up later, you can still catch up and do incredibly well. In some ways, you can learn, I would argue, a whole lot faster. And then there's another piece, and that is around 14-ish, human beings actually start kicking in their, cerebral cortex, the frontal lobe. They start thinking in abstractions. And both reading and mathematics involve abstraction. So it's almost like, the way I would argue it is, we all have to learn to read again, in a way. It's not what we learned earlier, mechanically going through the words, but how to really comprehend. So thinking about math and thinking about reading in particular, the first thing I want you to understand and stick with and remember and think with is that these two things are skills to be learned. We have a misnomer, kind of deceptive thing in our culture where we, at least in the U.S., probably in the Western world, maybe everywhere, but we have the idea that some people can do math and some people can't. Some people have a math chip and some people don't. Well, I suppose for world class that might be true, but in general, no, not at all. It'd be like saying, some people have a walking chip and some don't, because some walk better than others. That's true. Or running. Some run better than others. But most of us, unless something is severely wrong, can learn to run. We can learn to walk. And we do. Those are skills we learn. We're hardwired for them, and then we develop them. I think we're basically hardwired for mathematics and for reading. There's debate about that stuff, but I think there's some instinctive design in humans that makes that work. So math and reading, let's just think about it. It's a skill. And what I'm saying is the problem is they're not doing good skill development in these areas. They are approaching it in some other way. The worst, in my opinion, in Common Core, looking at it, it seems they're driven in math to try to get the student to understand math. And in learning most anything, you don't understand what you're learning at first. I remember taking Hebrew. And so Hebrew has these strange, letters, aleph and dalet and all these samic, and they're just strange curves, They mean nothing. And so literally the first thing I had to do is just copy them over. That's what the professor made us do. Copy them over and over and over. I don't know, 100 lines or more, just so we would memorize them. They didn't mean anything. They didn't carry any meaning. They didn't do anything except we were memorizing the pieces of the alphabet so we could put words together, basically. That's what skill development is. So the value, just know this, the value in reading, and I'll kind of bounce between these, but the value in reading is it does two things. One, it hooks up your neurons in a really different way, in a positive way, thinking, comprehension, processing information kind of way. So even reading poor books is probably better for us than watching great TV. Our mind in TV goes down to a theta state or whichever one it goes to, and we're kind of numbed out, semi-hypnotic, kind of just taking it in passively. Whereas reading is sort of active, and it can be tiring to someone who doesn't read well. Once you learn to read well, it doesn't tire you out near as quickly. In fact, you can a lot of times switch subjects and then keep reading, have more energy. So what reading does is it allows us to tap in to the minds of some really smart people that lived a long time ago or maybe live currently. But you actually have the capacity to take information through the written word and put it in your brain. You don't have to figure it out yourself. That's really quite cool, because in learning, if you can learn from someone else, that's like apprenticing or having a mentor, and you can learn like that. It's a phenomenon. And you can access information, and now with the internet, all over the world, experts all over the world. Occasionally I have to pay for some, the good stuff you pay for, the okay stuff, and it's still out there, plenty is out there. You can learn, figure out all kinds of things. It's really quite phenomenal. And even on the internet, there's plenty of reading that goes along. So this reading skill is important for our own mental development and to tap in to other minds. It turns out later, then the things we learn, we're able to share with others cooperatively through the written word, which is connected obviously to reading, or through spoken word, which is connected to reading. Math, on the other hand, is something that allows us to start learning, really, it's problem solving more than anything. That's what we're up to. And in solving problems, we're dealing with a situation, a circumstance, A equals B plus C, and so you're trying to figure out the variables and all. Well, in day-to-day life, it's a very similar thing. Jody and I this week made a discovery that our vent from the dryer, this is really great on reading and math, our vent from the dryer was filled with lint. And so she had a lint brush that tried to go through, but it was jammed up in there. And then it wouldn't go. And then it said, you can use a drill. And I figured out how to put it on a drill. And so we spin it really fast, and it would get out a little bit. It wouldn't really go. And so we're sitting here with this long tube through our house that goes to the dryer in that room. And then something in between, and we don't know. Jody's scared we're going to pull out rats or whatever. And so I finally, on the end of this long spinning thing, I just invented a different kind of spiral out of tie wire they use in construction for rebar and concrete. And I made a little corkscrew, and it would screw into it, and we could pull it out. And we did that over and over, and we pulled out gobs of lint. I mean, it's been 20 years. No wonder the dryer hadn't worked well. Well, that's a math problem. I want to go here. I've got an unknown element. I've got to solve for that element. And once I solve for the element, I got to solve for how to get that out of there. And maybe there's a better way, but I sure didn't know how, and I wasn't quite in the mood to pay someone for it. So that's math. Math is also the language of science. So if you want to do anything in science, learning to think and communicate in the language of math is absolutely essential. I remember I was in Missouri visiting Laura when she worked for the St. Louis Cardinals, our daughter. And we went to the Arch, right? And I was quite fascinated because the Arch has all the people that put it together. And you'd expect things like architects and construction people, because they're doing steel and all this stuff and elevators. I mean, it's It's a phenomenal thing. But one of the people up on the plaque that was instrumental in making that happen was somebody that had a degree in applied mathematics. So I took that to mean somebody just had to do the math on the application side of making this stuff work. It's kind of what engineers can do too. They can check the math part, the engineering part, make sure it works. That's actually the game. And so it's a language that allows you in these STEM courses, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. It's a language. There's another great thing that math does for us, and that is not only problem solve, not only give us the language of science, but it teaches us about absolutes. It teaches about right, wrong, yes, no. There are things that are solid, and mathematicians would say it's theoretical and whatever, but not really. You can have 2 plus 2, and that's going to equal 4 every time. That's what it's going to do. If you trick the game, you can try to make it equal something else, but knowing that there are some right answers is very helpful. All the world's not that way, but a lot of things are, and looking for, like what's the truth, what's right. Studying math actually helps develop that ability, skill to look for the right answer, the right thing. That's why these things are important. So, how do they work? Well, reading, give me a few more moments here. We'll talk about reading math, then I'm going to tell you what to do. So in reading, think about what reading really is, okay? So we all talk, we have language. I'm using sounds to communicate words. The words are combining together to convey ideas. You're playing the game with me. You roughly know what my words mean. You see when I put them together a certain way, you are able to interpret it and make sense. And so I'm taking an idea or knowledge from here and shooting it over there to you, take it in. And if we're in a good conversation, you ask questions like I would love for you to do, that gives a feedback loop. And so I get to answer questions and we get more clarity between us. Well, reading is simply more or less that talking dynamic put into some symbols that we can visually see without having to record their voice. So basically, linguists go into an unknown language, listen and learn the language and create symbols so they can replicate what it sounds like. So, HAPPY, happy. So we have these sounds, app, 2 P's, it's short A, and the Y sounds like an I, short I, happy. And so being able to do that, if somebody wrote down happy is the person who learns to learn, something like that. Well, all those symbols can go into my brain and I can think that person's thoughts after them. And that can happen hundreds or thousands of years later. Quite amazing, quite frankly. And so when you understand that's the game and you realize your child can talk, then you already know this child can read, because that's sort of what it is. In fact, we can read something out loud like I did a moment ago. And when I read it out loud to you, guess what happens? You hear it, you convert it, and you get the idea in your head that I'm trying to convey. That's quite cool. So it's a skill on that level. Math, in a similar way, they're just pieces of it, and these pieces fit together in a certain way. Multiplication, division, sorry, just suddenly had a Biden moment. The thing. No. So look, it's these essential things in more advanced math have more, sigmas and stuff for summation, etc. But this code still breaks down into a language, and you piece it together, and it conveys something to do with figuring out a solution to a problem that you can figure out the solution to the problem. So both of these things are skills. And if you think about it, how do you develop a skill? Think about it. How do you develop a skill? Well, the most important thing to realize is that everything's hard before it's easy, but it's easy once you know how. That's the important thing. That's the nature of the game. So when something's hard at first, that doesn't mean you're not good at it. It means you're not good at it yet, right? Doesn't mean you'll never be good at it. So it's a skill development. Everything's hard before it's easy. And then the second piece is practice. You want to practice. So practicing math, practicing reading is part of the key. Now, here's the rub. And we can see this in things like a taekwondo, any of those things that have belts and stages of what you learn and earn. So what you're experiencing or seeing is they start simpler until someone masters it and they move to something else and they master it and they move to something else, they master it, move to something else and master it. That's how you get there. And this is where we get in trouble. So with both reading and math, what we tend to do is rush through as though we're trying to get through the book. Like if we magically get through the book. Well, let me ask you that. Did you do that? Did you do that in school, in high school, and you just got through Algebra 2, and then the moment you walked out, you intentionally forgot it all? I did. I was required to study Spanish for 2 years in college. And when I got out, I kind of volitionally forgot it all. I was going to practice law in the northern part of Alabama. I wasn't expecting, 40 years ago, Spanish to be a big deal up there. Now I live in San Antonio, so occasionally I get to use it, but I didn't really learn it. I just got through it. When we take an approach that we want our kids to learn reading, learn math, everything changes. Because then what you're doing is you're just working with them at the level they're at. And so in reading, they learn phonics. They should learn phonics because phonics allows you to decode the words. And so as they learn to decode and then read aloud, and hopefully they don't guess words, but actually read the words, feedback to their brain lets them learn the words. And as they collect enough words that they know from language, from talking, as written ones, they can start piecing together more information, and then they can start reading books. And the books are easier and bigger letters, etc. And as they get skilled and more skilled and more skilled, they can read faster, better, deeper, more complicated material. But it goes in stages. And so if your child is not, at, let's say, stage, well, who cares? The 6th grade level of reading, they're just at a 3, that's great to know. They're at a 3rd grade level. So what you want to do is get them to go 3rd grade and a quarter. And then they nail that and they get to 3rd grade and a half. Nail that, and you keep going. And there are tricks to all that. And that's part of why we have courses on this stuff. But that's the game. Not rushing ahead, not being frustrated. They just are where they are. And if you can continue to improve and get them to read more, and I can tell you, there's little you can do better than just have them read out loud. Quite frankly, it is magic. You can get them to read the same things over and over again. That's what kids commonly do. They go over books over and over and over. I've got a lot of books. My favorite books I've read 6 times. Not novels necessarily, but things that I want to grasp the information, but it takes reading it through. And I can read that book a lot faster. Any chapter you read once, the second time through, you're going to read faster. The third time through, it'll be great. Try that with your kids. Read the same stuff over and over until they master it, and then move them up. Math is very similar. A lot of what happens with math, and we've worked with a lot of kids that are really not doing well in math in high school by the time it really shows up. So what we do is try to figure out where they are. And maybe they're at 6th grade. Maybe they're at 5th. Start there and master 6th grade and a quarter. Let's get that much done. And the way you do that is they keep working those problems over and over until they master it. We had all our kids master the tables first. So they weren't trying to think about 3 times 7. What's 3 times 7? 7 and 7, that's 14. And then 14, if you had 6, that's 20. And there's one left, 21. That's a lot of time. Rather than just knowing, not even knowing why, just learn it rote. That 7 times 3 is 21. 3 times 7 is 21, right? 14 plus 7 is 21, right? 7 plus 14 is 21. you know it like that, and you get to start looking at more complex things. So what I'd recommend on math is if they're struggling with a concept, just keep working those problems until they don't struggle. We would have kids redo a math lesson 1, 2, 3 times maybe. And in doing that process, they really could master it. In fact, our goal always with math was to get them we did 2 hours of math, broke it up into 2 sections, but we try to figure out how much math can they do in this 2-hour period, and still maintain about a 90. So each lesson was introducing new things, reviewing old things. We were using Saxon math. And in doing that game, they would bump into things that were harder. And so we'd bring the number of problems they were working on down because we wanted them to just master where they were, because that foundation affects you later. And that's the nature of the game with math. And so sometimes we might have them do the same lesson over a couple, 3 times. It might take more. But until they really mastered that stuff, reread the sections, wrestle with, do it again. Even if they're doing the same problems, they still have to show their work. So they're going to be doing a good job of nailing it down. See, the truth is, you know, this quote and how poorly Common Core does is built on pseudo-intellectualism. So it's a false intellectualism. And what it wants to do is find new ways and new ideas to teach people. And the problem is reading and math has been around for a long time. We've been teaching a long time. We've had some great readers, writers, math dudes and dudettes in the course of history. And a lot of this process is just simply continue to work at it. It's hard before it's easy. It takes practice. If you'll look at it, all the people that run really well or do math well or read well are the people that read a lot, that do a lot of math, that run a lot, because the practice is part of it. People that hit a golf ball a lot tend to do better than people that don't hit it much at all. So that practicing dynamic actually gets it into the skill level so they can access it like that. It also does one other thing, and that is it builds confidence. Because once they master one little part, then they can go on to the next and to the next. And so that history becomes the basis on which they understand what it's about. So those are my thoughts. I'll tell you the easiest thing you can do in teaching reading in particular is do something called narration. And basically that means you'd read for about 5 minutes and then stop and point to one of your kids and have them tell it back to you. Not verbatim, but the basic idea. So 1, they know it's coming, so they're accountable. And 2, when they're doing that narration process, they're having to listen and put it together in their head and repeat it back to you. So they're hooking up all this language center stuff they need to. If you want to read more about that, look for a lady named Charlotte Mason, who's in the UK. Her approach kind of trained guys like Winston Churchill, is in that generation where they practice this pretty widely in England in particular. So that's the thought. If you want kids good at reading and math, it's just a skill. I think anybody can learn it. We don't need to give up. Can anybody be a great mathematician? No. Can anybody learn through Algebra 2? I think absolutely. It's what's on the SAT. We've given up on kids, and we pretend that the problem is they just aren't made for it. And it's just not true. We don't give up on their ability to talk. So we work with them on talk. Even if they have pronunciation issues, we get speech therapists to make it happen. This is the same game. Keep working with the reading. Get them good at it. It'll make all the difference in the world. If they can read, they're going to have better job choices in this world. If they can do math, they're going to have better problem-solving skills and much less mistakes in common everyday math. And the problems that presents, it's going to equip them for more jobs in the future. If you add to that ability to write and convey what you're thinking, you'll go to the top, because the leaders actually know how to do this stuff. That's how the game goes. So, are there any questions you want to throw at me? This technology, I'm on Facebook Live and I'm on YouTube Live, and I'm on Periscope. So this live session, as we grow this thing, is going to be an opportunity to interact with you as you'll just type a question in. So, and they're posted, so we can ask questions later, but I'd love to do it now. And supposedly, all those will come back to me if I don't respond. Obviously, it didn't get through the system. So, give you another second or two just to see, do you have a question, especially about reading, mathematics, anything, homeschooling or with family is fine. But this subject of learning, reading, and math is so crucial. Remember my oldest son, Trip, when he went to the University of Texas. The other boys went there too, other three. But I remember asking him, I think it was a Christmas break his first year. I asked him again at the end. He said the same thing. He had forgotten his answer. But I said, what have you noticed about our homeschooling compared to your kid, the friends you have in classes? He said, you know what I can seem to do better than most of them? I said, nope. He said, read. Because I'll come to class, I will have read it, and I interact. I understand it and interact. And they read it, but they didn't have much comprehension going on. And it's partly because we had them reading 2 hours a day, so there's a lot of practice. And we taught them really how to understand what they're reading. There's some ways to go to hook your brain up so you're really making sense of it. So we have a course available on that if you're ever interested at independenthomeschool.com. We have free stuff there, a lot of blogs, etc. YouTube channel, sign up, over 200 videos on all this kind of fun stuff. And I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.